All right, the first thing I want to do is stand back and look at the painting, see if my, oops. Thank you. And if you have to bust out, just know how. Thank you. Okay, so start again. All right, I'm going to step back, look at my painting, check and see, have any of the colors sunken in? Are my values correct based on what I'm seeing in front of me? You can pull that door too so I'm not disturbing them. Okay, so as I look at this, I feel like I need a little more intensity, saturation, if I can get it, in the apple. It's kind of sunken in a little bit, and if I look at the apple over there, now this is from a slightly different viewpoint, but if I look at the apple over there, it's really intense, right? It's really vivid. So I want to think about ways that I can get a little more saturation into the apple, and it might mean adjusting my values a little bit. It may be a little darker than it needs to be here, edging a little too much towards the black. So I might do a couple of things. What I might do is get a little more of the pure, most saturated red, and also see if I can find a red that is modified a little bit with the complement of red to kind of take a little bit of the edge off without making it too dark. The black has really pushed that darkness in a little bit more than I want to. Also here on the cloth here, I feel like I want to punch that up a little bit. But I want to be careful that in punching it up in value, I don't make it too chalky, right? So that's one of the things that happens with titanium white, is it will really weaken the color to the point that it looks really chalky and nothing has any kind of sense of true local color anymore. So I want to make sure I'm careful about that. I want to bring up some saturation in this pair and maybe make the division between the form shadow and the light a little more distinct. When I squint my eyes at the actual pair, I see a real shape of the shadow here that is really, it's attractive. It gives me a sense of the volume of the pair without it just being a big flat shape, right? This is getting a little too uniform. And then I'm going to play around a little bit with my greens up here on this pair. They've gotten a little bit murky, but that's what happens with this palette, right? It's the weakness of this palette that you don't get a pure green. The other thing I want to look at is in my neutrals in the background, like here, is this too warm? Does it edge a little too close to the red? Should I mix a neutral with the red and the green, but let it edge a little more towards green so that I get a little more contrast there between those two colors? I don't want it to be really green, and I want the value to be light, because when I look over here at where the cloth goes right behind the apple, there is a real distinct value shift, but it's cooler than the apple, right? The apple is really warm, and that right behind it, that cloth right behind it, is very cool. Well, this neutral is pretty warm behind the apple. So how do I work with this palette to start to get a sense of the space between the apple and what's behind it, and a sense of the volume? Okay, so I've mixed my palette and gotten most of the colors that I think I'm going to use. And since I'm late in the painting process now, I'm painting really fat or thick, so thin to thick, lean to fat. So I'm really going to pick up more paint on my brush. I'm going to get a little bit of my medium. And I think I'm going to start here behind the apple. I really want to try to play up that contrast. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of green on my brush, and I'm just going to lay that in there, a light value. So that kind of cools off a little bit, right? Because this green is a really gray green. I might mix it with a little bit of my neutral that I mixed. So this neutral I mixed using red and green, and I'm letting it fall a little closer to the green. And what I'm hoping is that that shift in temperature is going to start to create more contrast between those two colors, right? So I've got a palette with a real weakness, but I'm going to use what I have in that palette to start to create more of a sense of contrast. So already I see a difference here, where that apple is now pushing forward a little bit more and that green is pushing back. This was too pink, way too warm. So the pattern on the cloth has changed a little bit. I'm going to stick with the pattern that I had. I'm only using a little bit of medium now, and when I leave that paint on the canvas, I'm going to go ahead and start to let it have a little more physical presence on the canvas, right? A lot of y'all, as I was walking around, your paint is really, really thin. So you can start to build up a little bit. Now my areas that are deep background, I may let them stay a little thinner, a little leaner, and really build up where I want more visual emphasis to be, right? Where the light's hitting, where the color is, where objects are a little bit closer. And let those things start to have a little more presence in the painting. And then there may be some places where I want a little bit of that warm to start to come through, so I'm not going to cover everything. I'm going to let those colors that are already there start to work with the colors that I'm laying down. So you start to get a layering, you start to see color coming through color. This is where a lot of times people will get like first or second stage of a painting down and it looks really good and they're like, well, I'm done. No. It's such a building process of building color on top of color on top of color. And then maybe going back to one of your earlier colors. So this is where it gets really fun, is you get to start building, really building on top of what you've got down there. And sometimes when you start to get some of these things showing through, it ends up having, are you kidding?
That's not possible. It's
fire drill. We're going to pause.